Hey guys, today we are going to work on step 3 using the rest of our clay here. Now, if you are starting this step and you are getting through the steps of the step, and you find out that you quite don't have enough clay, let me know and we can fix that. We can add a little bit more to yours. Okay, but we're taking our extra clay that we have, and I'm going to roll out another circle just like I did with step number 2. Okay, so I have my slats on either side. I have my rolling pin and I have it kind of flattened out. It was a ball of clay, but I have it kind of flattened out. And so I'm just going to start rolling my clay a little bit on both sides. And I am turning it so that it rolls out pretty evenly because I am trying to create a circle here. Okay, so I'm just kind of switching this around. I'm keeping the slats close enough together so that whenever the rolling pin does hit the slats, I know that I have the right thickness. Okay, so I'm just kind of rolling back and forth and flipping it around. Okay, I do have a couple of cracks that I'm going to go ahead and fix really quick because crack is back. Okay, going along this side. Okay, and smoothing out this here. Okay, I'm not super worried about my ends just because this is going to be a little bit bigger than my pot that I have already. Okay, so this is rolled out pretty well. I'm gonna roll out this side. Okay, and I am going to go ahead and smooth out some of these spots around the edge here. Okay, double check and make sure I didn't accidentally make anything too tall. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab my flower pot that I have so far. It's nice and wrapped up from last time. Okay, and I'm going to be very careful whenever I take this out because I don't want to accidentally collapse it because it's still in a pretty fragile state. And the more that it dries out, the more fragile it's going to get. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to double check and see how dry this bottom of my pot is here. Okay, and it's pretty decent. It's not like, it doesn't feel like slip. Okay, so that means that if I set this on top of here, it will be okay. And I'm actually going to carefully turn this over. I'm going to set this right on top of this, just like I did in step 2. Okay, I'm going to center it. And I'm just going to start off with drawing the circle. I'm not going to cut through. I'm just drawing the outside. Okay. So I'm drawing around the outside here, just like this. Okay, and I can move my pot to the side and I have this nice circle. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a circle that's a little bit smaller than the outer part, okay, because I'm creating a foot for my my flower pot here. And this will actually help, this is nice for draining purposes, so that if you have it sitting on a surface, it will dry out a little bit better. Sometimes they tend to release a little bit of moisture through the bottom of clay. And so if you have that sitting directly onto a surface, it can kind of mess up your surface, especially if you don't have a drain tray underneath. Okay, so this will help out with that a little bit. Okay, so I've drawn my circle here. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my, my paper clip and I'm going to bring this in a little bit. Okay, so I think about the thickness of the walls of your pot. Okay, and I'm going to bring this in a little bit here. Okay, so I'm just kind of drawing around here as carefully as I can. If it helps it, if it's easier for you to use a pencil for this part, you can. Okay, but I'm trying to keep it about the same distance throughout. Just like this. Okay, now this second line that I just drew is actually going to be the outside part, okay, of my little foot, my little pedestal that I'm going to have. Okay, and then I'm going to draw a smaller one on the inside. But in order to not get super confused, I am going to go ahead and cut out this middle one. Okay, so just to look a little bit closer, I have two rings going on. Okay, so I have my outer ring. This is what I traced around my flower pot with. And this ring that I just drew, I try to keep it pretty close, right? So I didn't perfectly get it, but I try to keep it pretty close to the outer ring as kind of the same distance around. Okay, and I remember I looked at how wide how thick the walls were of my flower pot, and so I drew that accordingly. Now on the inside one that I drew myself, I am going to carefully cut through just like this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and slice off this way. And I'm going to go ahead and slice up here just a little bit, just so I can get this out of the way. Make it a little bit easier. And I'll set that to the side. Okay, and then I'm going to finish cutting through. Just like this. Okay, so I'll take that to the side there. Now, it should be pretty close to the inner space that your pot has, right? So it should be pretty close in size here. Okay, we don't want to accidentally drop it in there. That would be bad news bears. Okay, but I am going to go ahead and take this here, and I'm going to just kind of smooth the edges out a little bit. I'm not pressing down. I'm just kind of smoothing things out a little bit so it's a little less jagged. Okay, now I'm going to draw another inner circle. Okay, following the same, my circle that I have here. Okay, so I'm going to think about how thick my walls are of my pot are, right, around here. And I'm going to have it about that thick as well. Okay, so I'm just kind of starting here. And I'm just drawing for now. I'm not cutting. I'm just drawing to make sure that I like how I've put this out first. Okay, so I'm just focusing on keeping it a consistent distance from the edge. Okay. So I'm turning this around here. Okay, so I feel like that looks pretty good. I feel like it looks pretty close. I think I am going to bring this in just a tiny bit more over here on this edge. Okay, and then now I'm going to cut it through, but I don't want to slice this at all. Okay, I'm just working on cutting directly through on the inside. Okay, and I feel that whenever you pull it towards you, it's a little bit easier to do. And so I like to move my clay so I can continue to pull my paper clip towards me. Okay, so I'm bringing this through here. Just like this. Okay, and I'm going to carefully lift up my circle here. And I have a little bit of a spot that I need to kind of fix here. Let's see. See if that helps. Okay, and I want to be super careful because I don't want to mess up my outer ring. This is the thing that I want to keep. So I'm just going to try slicing it through here and see if that makes it easier to kind of press that out without messing up my ring. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more cutting over here. Bit of a better slice. There we go. All right, so I have that one. I'm going to clean up this little edge that I have here. Okay, and don't worry if it's not totally perfect yet. I still have a little bit of scratchiness, but whenever I score and slip this to my pot, I'll be smoothing out the edges and the walls anyways, so it's fine. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of cut back through here. There we go. All right. Now, I am going to make sure that I didn't get too slicey here in the center. Okay, so if you need to cut a smidge more out, you can do that. I think I'm going to leave that part for now. I'm going to check on the side. Okay, so it's looking, it's pretty consistent. I got a little bit smaller, a little thin on this side, but it'll be okay. Okay, so I have this here, and now I'm going to move my extra clay out of the way. I'm going to carefully move my ring over here, and then I'm going to take my planter that I have. Okay, and of course we made that drainage hole last time. I'm going to flip this over here. Okay, and I'm going to place my foot onto my pot right here. So very carefully, and I want to make it kind of nice and circular. Okay, and then I'm going to trace around this very lightly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the inside a little bit too. Okay, just like that. And then I'm going to carefully take my circle off, and I'm going to flip it over since I'm going to be scoring and slipping this side. Okay, so I'm going to take, I have this nice little double ring area. I'm going to take my paper clip, and I'm going to start scoring in around this ring. And I am going to overlap a little bit on the inside and the outside just to make sure it's nice and secure. And I want to be very careful not to press too hard because I don't want to accidentally cave this in. Okay, now because this is the third step and we've let it sit out for a little bit, it's going to be closer to leather hard, so that's good and that's really helpful. Okay, but I still want to make sure that I'm not pressing too hard. So I like to kind of go through in one direction, kind of like just regular hatching, like this. Right, and then I can go back and kind of start the crossing part, cross hatching. Okay, because remember, you're basically making yourself a Velcro, right? And we're doing two fuzzy pieces together to help stick like Velcro. Okay, so that's pretty good, scored and slipped. Make sure I'm fully happy with all of that. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing over here on my little ring. Okay, and I want to be really careful because this clay here is a little bit softer. It hasn't dried out quite as much as this is. If your clay is super dry for this, I recommend re-moisturizing it first. So that means that you might have to kind of work with the clay, adding in a little bit of water, and then letting it sit and really soak in that water. Okay, so that means that if you have to rework your clay, sometimes you have to rehydrate it and then let it sit and then use it the next day. One of those things. Okay, so now I'm going back in the opposite direction, trying to get my cross hatching, my crisscrosses in there. So it's nice and textured all the way through. All right. Okay, now we're going to slip both sides. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the ring first, I think, and then I'll work on the pot. Okay, and remember, you want a consistency that's kind of saucy. Think about ketchup's consistency. It's not super watery, but it's not super thick and pasty either. Okay, and so I'm just kind of taking this thin clay, remember, because it's like a glue, this slip right here, and I'm just patting this on. So I'm not rubbing this into the base of my clay here, I'm just kind of dabbing the glue on with my finger here. Okay, so I'm just kind of pressing this down here all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get both of those taken care of, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm going to take this bottom ring here. I'm going to carefully flip it over onto my pot right here. Okay, and I added enough slip so that it's a little bit oozy whenever I set this down. Okay, I want to make sure it's pretty evenly set here in the middle. Okay, I don't want it to be too far to one side, and I'm going to kind of turn this a little bit. Okay, so if I need to reform it a little or make some slight adjustments, I can do that, but I'm kind of pressing it down, not too hard, but I'm kind of pressing it down and really kind of squeezing this in here. Okay, and now I'm going to let this sit for just a little bit, and I'm going to give it some time to cure.
One eternity later.
All right, so I went about 2 to 3 minutes with my foot kind of sitting on here, curing, right? So we want to let it sit for a little bit. Okay, and the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of slip on both sides of the seam to start smoothing that out. Now, this part of the slip, for this part, I want to use the slightly thicker slip. Okay, so you don't want it to be super runny. You want it to be kind of more of a paste. Okay, and all I'm doing is I'm just kind of bringing this around the outside and the inside. Okay, kind of just pressing it down in there. I'm using my hand to steady this because I don't want to accidentally move it to a spot that I don't want it to be at. Okay, so I'm just kind of using this all around the outside here. Okay, so okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the inner ring as well. Okay, so I have my outer part done. I'm going to go ahead and do on the inside. I'm just really smoothing this out. And again, I'm using my hand to kind of help steady this so I don't accidentally press my foot ring out of the intended spot. So I'm kind of just working this through here. Okay, and now I'm going to start cleaning it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to take one of my wooden tools. You might have a plastic one. There's a couple plastic ones around, like this one. I think I'm going to start with this wooden one first and then kind of go from there. Okay, so I have my rings. I'm going to start on the outside part since I did that first. And like I said, I was just kind of pressing this in originally, taking my extra slip and putting it there. Okay, and now I'm just going to work on kind of smoothing out the sides here, like this, just very carefully. Okay, and what this does is this kind of helps seal that seam up for us. Okay, it also helps smooth out if you had any marks like scoring outside of the ring like I did. I always do that just to make sure that it's well scored and slipped. Okay. Take this extra slip off of here. Okay, and this little seam over here looks like it needs just a little bit more. So I am going to take a little bit of extra and kind of press this in here. And I might let this dry a smidge and I'll come back to it and smooth it out. So I'm going to let that sit for a little bit and I'm going to work on the inside now. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. And I actually think I'm going to try the smaller plastic one for the inside. And I have two ends here. You can kind of look and see what makes the best sense for you. I think I'm going to try this angled end here. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of bring this around here. So what I'm really doing is I'm kind of pressing some of that extra clay into the seam, that extra slip And then I'm still picking up some of the extra slip. Okay, because I want to be nice and thorough. Okay. I'm going to use this side just a little bit to kind of help. Smooth that out a little bit there. And this kind of just helps seal it in. Sealing the deal. Okay, now it still looks a little bit rough, but I do have my edges kind of smoothed in here. I'm gonna go check on this one over here. Okay, and then once I have that, I can kind of take off some of this extra stuff. So I'm gonna be super, super careful, but I am going to use my little nib here. And so I'm just gonna kind of scrape off this top here, around this way. Okay, so I have a little bit of extra clay, a little extra slip. Okay, and I'm gonna do the same thing with my edges here, just very carefully. Making sure I don't have any going over that corner there. So I want it to be nice and smooth. Okay, so I'm just kind of going around and cleaning that up. And then I'm gonna use my fingers to finish this out. Okay, so I'm just going through very carefully. Okay, if you feel like your slip is a little bit too wet, and so you're having the issue of like it's moving away from where you want it to be, then let it sit out a little bit more and dry out just a little bit. Okay, so making sure this bottom edge is nice. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and double check this inner part. Okay, and I'm going to smooth out on the inside part here. Okay, and before I finish this step, I do want to go through and double check and make sure everything is nice and smooth. So my top ring here is smooth. I really want to actually look at it from all angles. I know that I have smoothed it out, but I actually want to look and make sure that it looks good to go from all angles. Okay, because we want this to look nice and pretty. It's called having good craftsmanship. Okay. So this looks pretty good over here. Okay, this is nice and flat, and the inside is looking pretty good too. Okay, now I have 2 steps before I'm totally done. On the second video, I had a couple steps towards the end, and everybody felt like once they put the bottom part on, they were totally done, and they missed the drainage hole part and the bagging it up. Okay, so make sure you don't skip over that stuff. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take you can use a pencil, you can use one of these edges if it's small enough, or you can use your paper clip. And you are just going to write your name on the inside. Don't press down too hard. And whenever you're writing your name, make sure that you are writing out your first name all the way, and at least your last initial, if not your full last name. Okay, just because these can get smudged easily, and if you have just your initials, that's only 2 letters. And so if those 2 letters both happen to get smudged, we can't figure out whose it is. Okay. So it's super important to make sure that you have your actual name written there. And I like to include the year on mine as well, so I can kind of look back and be like, oh yes, that's when I made that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sign my name on here. Okay, and this is 2021. Okay, so I have that on there. Clean up that edge just a little bit. Okay, and actually I feel like that one was a little bit too wide. I'm gonna try this out. You just don't want to cut too deep into it whenever you write your name. Okay, and then writing this in on the very middle part is also helpful because it's less likely to lose part of your name. Okay, it could still happen, but it's less likely. Okay, now we're going to store this in our bag just like we did, but this time we're going to make sure that we store it upside down just like it is currently here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bag here. I'm going to set this in here. Okay, I'm going to carefully set my pot in here. Okay, and then if your clay is very soft still, then you don't necessarily need to spray it if you're able to move on to the next step tomorrow. Okay, if you're not able to move on to the next step, we're going to add just one quick little spray because we want the bottom part to be dry enough so that whenever we work on adding in our design, it doesn't get squished from being upright. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick little, here's one, here's two, and I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, so I'm going to bring this up here. Carefully around the edges. Okay, and remember we smooth this along the edges because it helps keep that moisture locked in. Okay, I'm going to be very careful with that top because remember mine is upside down. So I'm going to kind of twist this and put this to the side. And whenever you put this in your cubby, you want to set this so that this is tucked the best that it can be. I'm going to go ahead and take my little bits down here. Okay, and I'm going to be super, super careful. Okay, and so that is it for step number 3. Step number 4, you'll work on the next day because you want to give your foot ring a little bit of time to dry out before you start that. So I will see you on the next one. Bye.